what kind of work do I want to be making if I'm going to make stuff for the next year and nobody buy it? What is going to make me absolutely happy? So I said that whenever I close my eyes, whatever I see will be what I make. And so what I saw was my people, like my just black people being human, being free, being struggling against oppression, like fighting against the system, still being themselves and being beautiful and being proud and being like righteous. Like that's what I saw. And so I said, if this is gonna go down in flames, like if this is the only chance I'm ever gonna have, that's the
Mm-hmm.
type of work I'm gonna make.
Hello, print friends, and welcome to the 17th episode of Pine Copper Lime, the internet's #1 printmaking podcast. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. I release an episode every 2 weeks, and on the off weeks, I publish an article on the Pine Copper Lime website, which features images and maybe a bit more information about the artists I'm going to interview. Quick bit of housekeeping before we dive in. If you're listening to this episode the week it comes out, I'm in the middle of a great giveaway on the Pine Copper Lime Instagram. I partnered with Mathieu Coulange, who designs stunning handmade printmaking tools from Burins to Barons. Everyone I know who's used these beauties has nothing but amazing things to say about them. So head on over to the Pine Copper Lime Instagram now and enter for your chance to win a €150 gift certificate to the online store. Looking for other ways to get more involved with PCL? Think about joining the Pine Copper Lime Patreon page. I have levels starting at just $1 a month, and thank yous like totes, stickers, postcards, and personal serenades. And I realized this the other day. I don't say this enough. Thank you so much to everyone who is already a member. It means the world to me that you're saying, hey, I like Pine Copper Lime, and I would like it if it kept existing. And thanks to you all, I've reached that critical tipping point where I'm now officially not actively losing money every time I put out an episode. So, again, your support is amazing, and I truly couldn't do it without you. Also, don't forget to check out the Pine Copper Lime online print gallery. There's some great prints there from Southeast Asia and Australia. Of course, as always, there's a link in the show notes to all of this. My guest this week is Jamaal Barber, printmaker, curator, collaborator, podcast host, grad student, husband, and father. Jamaal offers his insights into what it takes to be a successful artist, his own story of taking the leap from weekend art fairs to full-time artist, and his print practice making work about all aspects of Black life in America. He also gives us a look into his current exhibition titled 400, A Collective Flight of Memory, in which Barber has collaborated with 22 artists as a reflection on the collective Black experience during the 400 years since the first slave ships arrived off the coast of Virginia. And it's on exhibition now at the Aviation Community Culture Center in Atlanta through July 15th, 2019. I have to say, I was a little nervous interviewing another podcast host, but Jamaal is a spectacular and generous guest with incredible insights to share. So I can't wait to hear what you all think. And without further ado, here's Jamaal. Hey Jamaal, how's it going?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah. I'm a fan of the podcast, so I'm very excited to be included in my printmaker family. Talk about stuff.
You are very much in the printmaker family. We're very happy to have you here. I have to say, I was a little bit more nervous to do this interview than maybe
Really?
any other one that I've done. Because as we'll get into, one of the many hats that you wear is being a podcast host. So
Yes.
I feel a little bit like, I've like invited like the sensei into my studio or something.
a fellow traveler. Think about it like that.
Okay, I like that. I like that a
Yeah,
lot. I like that a lot.
yeah, because
Um,
you probably know just as much about it I do.
I think you and I both had the same experience where we just were like, man, I really wish a podcast like this existed. I think I'm just going to go make it, even though I've never done anything like this before.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That was
Yeah.
basically what I did.
Yeah. You do many things, including hosting the Studio Noise podcast that I want to chat
Yeah.
about more in detail later. But you're an artist, you're a curator, you're a collaborator, you're a father, you're a grad student. Am I missing
Ooh.
anything? Like, that's a lot.
Oh man. Yeah, that is a lot. It gets more intimidating when you say it like that,
Oh,
straight in a row
sorry.
too. It it is a lot.
Yeah.
That's funny because I do think about it sometimes that um, every time I get a chance, I always think like, all right, I'm gonna not do this thing, but I end up picking up like two other things. So I never really get my time back. So that's kind of the curse of ambition, I guess. I guess that was it.
Do you have more than 24 hours in a day somehow? Like, do you have a
No. I
magical...
wish I did. I wish I did. I'm barely holding it together. Like every time somebody sees me, they just keep running around and running around
Oh,
until I go to
man.
sleep. That's
As
all it is.
as they say in Australia, cheers, mate. Like, I hear you. But yeah, if you, so that's sort of, how I would introduce you, but I'd love to hear your introduction of yourself and sort of how you would define the who you are, where you are, what you do, interview questions.
I think first and foremost, I always describe myself as a printmaker. I think that's the one thing, even beyond just being an artist, because I did different types of art before I started printmaking. But when I started printmaking, I started screen printing. Like something in my mind clicked that this is the thing. Like this is who I am and what I should be doing, and it felt really natural. So first, I always started to say I'm a printmaker first and foremost, and then I often forget that I do the podcast because the podcast is so much about me just enjoying the company of other artists, and kind of that is kind of the most pure fun thing that I do is talk to people on the podcast. Like even though it is like a lot of work with the scheduling and finding time and editing, my co-host Jasmine does a lot of the editing. But the podcast is just about the most fun thing I know I can just go to and enjoy. Like everything else is work. Like grad school is work.
Yeah.
Like being a father is work. Being a husband is work. But just sitting back, having a conversation, enjoying the company of one random other artist, I think that's kind of the best thing that I do for myself. I enjoy printmaking though. Don't get me wrong. Like I love printmaking. Like it's like I love it like too much. Like people don't understand like how much like going into the print studio. I work at Atlanta Printmaker Studio down here in Atlanta, and it's like my favorite place. Like I feel so at home while I'm there. Like I don't know. It's like it's just something about being in there and working like that. I do love love love.
Wow, I feel like that is such a beautiful theme in this podcast, which is that a lot of the guests just talk about that magic moment with printmaking when, and it's different, often different media. Someone says, oh, I didn't even care about it till I picked up a litho crayon. Or when I had Ali Norman on, she told this story where she was in a litho class first, and the whole time she was in the litho class, she kept looking through into the etching studio. Like she didn't pay any attention. So there's just certain media or even, or the community or something where people just, they kind of are floating through life, and then printmaking hits them, and it's just that, oh, I've come home. And I love that so much about what we do, and I love that it's a theme in the podcasts.
Yeah. Now I think for me, if you haven't heard this story, but I started printmaking. I went to Binders, which is an art store here in Atlanta, to get more paints because I was doing watercolors and acrylic painting and all that kind of stuff at the time. And so I went and I saw a screen printing demo, and it was just sitting there. It was like an hour and a half, maybe. And it was something about looking at him doing it that it just clicked. I just figured it out. Like I knew what I could do. I knew what I could produce. I knew if I did this, I could do that. Like you figure out all the different variety of things you could do,
Mm-hmm.
like in that moment. And then it's like, that's me. Like I can do that. And so that day, instead of buying my watercolors and stuff, I bought a screen. And I
Hmm.
bought all the emotion and all the other equipment, and I was doing screen printing out of my closet. I did it for years. Like I had it perfectly set up. I took my daughter's Elmo chair and like a 300-watt light bulb, and I had this like it had this rigged up on like this little ironing board. It was like exactly 18 inches from the screen. It took me 22 minutes to shoot a screen.
Oh my
And
gosh.
if you can imagine 22 minutes sitting there watching this light bulb, it was terrible. But like, and when I was, so when I came to Atlanta Printmaker Studio and it was like a minute and a half, I was like, what? You could make a screen in a minute and a half? It was, but yeah, so that's how I started screen printing. So I remember taking a class at East Carolina. That's where I got my undergrad degree in graphic design. I took a printmaking class there, but I didn't really care about it. And I remember doing woodcuts, and we did, I think it was an intaglio project. I barely remember that class, but I do kind of remember the woodcut. And that's when I started doing woodcuts. And that's when I really fell in love with
Mm.
printmaking. And so now that's basically what I do now. It's like woodcuts with screen print enhancements or embellishments or like all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, because I was a little surprised when you were saying that it was sort of screen printing that was the bug that bit you, because I really associate you as a woodcut artist, and I know you use screen print, but I feel like woodcut is what I think about when I think about your work. But
Yeah, I think that's what's natural to me. Like
hmm.
now, like it's hard. Now I started. I'm in grad school, so I started doing stone lithography and
Mm.
like getting back to drawing. And like even that process for me is tough because I look at everything like a woodcut. Like it's just a certain way that you are kind of subtracting from your surface to get relief. Like I think like that when I draw now. So I'm having to switch my
Mm.
mentality up completely. But like I said, I fell into it, and it's just man natural for me now.
Yeah, and I think that that is something that sort of screen print and woodcut have in common, is that you're thinking about your image in these blocks of color and these like layering
Yeah.
of blocks of color, which is, it's like you've been doing the tango and then you're asked to salsa or something. It's really like it's like a way of really altering how you think of image making. And I can
Oh
imagine
yeah.
it gets really easy to just fall into that pattern, especially once you're comfortable with it, and then being asked to like, oh, sort of like reverse it a little bit and like go back to just drawing must be interesting.
Yeah. It's very difficult because especially when I started woodcutting, I came from watercolor, which is all layering and
Mm.
gradients and kind of laying it down. So when you switch to screen printing, is kind of the same too. But you think about something being bold, like bold graphic, like how punchy can you make it, like how in your face, impressive, big, bold kind of thing you can do. Where watercolor is very delicate and kind of flowy and
Hmm.
all these like gradients and stuff. So I don't know why I was trying to be a watercolor artist so hard. Like it really it never fit me. Like I tried extra hard.
Yeah, that's so funny how we kind of get these ideas in our head sometimes, and then they just sort of stay there, maybe just because they've been there all along. So you said that you'd gone to your undergrad for graphic design. Was that right?
Yep, yep.
Um, were you always visually minded? Like, were you a kid growing up who was really interested in art? Like, tell me about kind of the early days of Jamaal and a paintbrush.
I didn't actually paint until I got to college. Like, because before that, I grew up in Littleton, North Carolina. And if you have ever been in Littleton, North Carolina, well, I take it back. Nobody's been in Littleton, North Carolina except for me.
Okay.
Right, so it's a small place in the middle of nowhere. It's like it used to take me 45 minutes to go to the grocery store. Like
Oh,
there's nothing
okay.
there.
Yeah.
So it was mostly the minute we moved there. This was like, man, it's elementary school. But the minute we moved there, I wanted to leave. So
Mm.
it always became drawing as a way to not be bored or to be somewhere else or to do something else. But we didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't afford paints and brushes and all this other stuff. So it was basically like drawing, like pen and paper, like
Mm-hmm.
sketchbooks. I'm still a big sketchbook person, like even to this day, because it's just a natural way of like kind of expressing yourself when nobody else is around and there's nothing else to do. Or you rode your bike as much as you want to ride your bike for the day, and it's too hot. Like
Yeah.
you just don't want to do all this other stuff. So that was kind of the beginning for me. So I didn't get access to. I actually didn't meet a real working artist until I was in my 20s. So it wasn't even to me. It wasn't even possible to be this person that makes art,
Hmm.
only art for a living, because it's so much about being in a small town South is about surviving,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just you want to get you. I always tell a story. You want to get you some land, and you want to get you a trailer, and you want to
Mm-hmm.
be able to get gas in your car and fix your car when it go wrong. Like that's kind of the dream of most of the people there, and
Mm.
like people want more, but it's not there. So what do? Right? You have to go somewhere else, and most people don't want to go somewhere else. They want to stay by their family and be happy. So,
Right.
so in dealing with that, it's very hard to conceive of being an artist as a full time thing. And so it became very new and very real when I went to college, and I actually saw people that made fantastic, amazing art for real. Like you know what I'm saying? Like this is what they did for their entire life. They some of them were teachers, but still like you teach and make art. Like that's incredible.
Yeah, you're still just being around art all day.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
You're still yeah, you're still an artist. And like,
yeah.
you tell somebody, hey, in Littleton or any small town, you can always whenever you tell somebody that you're an artist, you always get somebody that says, I used to draw. That's the biggest thing. They used to draw and they like to make things and they like to create, but their life is not set up for that. Like my life is set up where I have to pay for this car. So I got to go work at the hospital or the gas station or whatever restaurant is new in town. Like, you gotta live. You gotta work in the grocery store. You gotta do all these other things. You're a mechanic. You fix cars. Like whatever you do. But art is a luxury thing, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just not in the vocabulary of people that live like that. So it wasn't in my vocabulary, even though I needed it. Now I can look back and see that I needed art because I had more to say than I was allowed to, or than I had the opportunity to. Is a better way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was my early life. So being in college, right? I actually went to college fully intending to be a business major,
Huh.
and I was fine, and I would have done that, but I took this one drawing class as an elective, and soon that first day, as soon as I took it, I was like, I gotta call my mama and tell her I'm gonna be an art major. And I had to figure out like how am I gonna tell her this? She's gonna be really disappointed. But, but she ended up being cool with it because
Yeah.
they saw me drawing. Like I used to draw a lot. I do it
Yeah.
all the time. So they saw me drawing a lot. So
I mean,
they
moms
knew.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They knew. She knew before I knew. Put it like that.
Yeah, my husband had kind of a similar experience where he went into college and he was going to be a ceramics engineer, and he was taking the tour of, and he went to Alfred, which has Alfred University in Alfred, New York, incredible printmaking studio there.
Oh
And
wow. Yeah.
he was on the tour, and he was with his dad, and they walked through the printmaking studio, and Tim didn't even say anything, and his dad just turned to him and said, please don't switch your major. Like, so, and then, yeah, he had to make that phone call,
Yeah. Yeah. It's all
Dad.
downhill from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause especially like when you start doing it, like it's really nothing else like making art. Like it's
Hmm.
I don't if you it's hard to explain it to people. Like my wife is a chemist, so
Mm.
I imagine that she feels the same way about like mixing chemicals that I
Hmm.
do about like carving wood. Like it's got to be the same because it's like, what else could I do? What at this point, what else could I really do that way I would be satisfied at? And I cannot
Yeah.
imagine doing anything else. And so, that's where you start at. Like, yo, how now? Now there is, how can I do this and make money?
Yes.
And so, So there you go. Now that's the rest of my life. From that day, that was the rest of my life.
Well, one of the things I really appreciate about Studio Noise is when you and your sorry, what's Jasmine's last name?
Williams, Jasmine
Williams.
Nicole. Yeah, what's
Yeah.
up, Jasmine? I know
Yeah.
she's listening.
Yeah. Hi, Jasmine. So when you guys talk about art or the art scene, you also talk about these really kind of practical ideas as well in it. And I think that that's so important for artists to hear because it's not this totally like head in the clouds theoretical
Right.
praxis blah blah blah. I love it when you guys just will sometimes just talk about nuts and bolts advice for an artist, like how like I think it was your most recent one before you guys went on break. It was just the two of you and you just were like saying all of this great stuff that I was like, this should be required, this episode should be required listening for any art undergrad, because I think that you do have a great balance of being in love with art, being in love with printmaking. Like anyone can hear that from the way you talk about it, but you also have this other side where you're like, how do I make this work? I know that it's like you can't just lock yourself away in the print studio all day and just make and then sit back and complain about why no one's giving you any money. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so yeah, like just kind of about like this is how you get yourself seen and this is how you do that, which is totally a conversation that needs to happen more in art school and in the art world in general. But I think sometimes we get these ideas that like, oh, you want to make money? I guess you're not a real artist. Like,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And grad school is a lot like that too. Well, not necessarily like, but they want to make sure you know the things about art, which is cool, which is exactly where you go to school, right? But like I'm learning a lot just being in school and having the time to learn lithography, like stone lithography, like sit with it and have
Mm.
my own like set of stones I can pick and grind and mess it up. Like all this stuff is mad practical. But I was a full time artist for 5 years before I got into grad school, and I
Mm-hmm.
was working a working artist, quote unquote, when uh, let's see, I moved to Atlanta, and I got a lot of different jobs, and then I ended up getting a graphic design job, and I had that for 7 years. And then when I got laid off from that job, was kind of the point where I was like, okay, I had been doing art shows on the weekend. I got into like the Decatur Art Festival shows down here. I was doing art walks. I was like, getting my name out there, like we always tell people to do it. And then it just came to that point where after I got laid off from the graphic design job, I could not imagine myself going and getting back in the process of applying for a job,
Hmm.
like trying to like appease this other person to please allow me to make a living and take care of my family for your peanuts when you making like however many thousands of dollars off my work.
Yeah.
And so, and I know that when I talk to people, it's never the art that makes it hard, right? The art is the fun part, like the making, the sitting in your house, even if people don't have a studio, if they just sit at their coffee table in their living room and they're painting, they feel good in that moment. But then what do you do? Because it's not enough. Like you have to do so much other things, so many other things to get back to that moment of this is what I love to do and this is what I enjoy. Like the practical matter is how do you get more time in the studio? A lot of those people, and that probably comes from the story I told you before, how everybody used to draw. They used to draw and they used to enjoy it and they really enjoyed it and they would if they had the opportunity, but they couldn't figure out how to make it work. And so that's always the biggest problem that I run into with anybody that I meet just that come into APS, Atlanta Printmaker Studio, or that come to those art walks I used to go on, like outside of like Marietta neighborhoods and stuff like that. That is always the issue. It's always the other things that get in the way. It's like the perseverance, the stick with itness that's not a word, but it's kind of that thing where how do you hold on when it's absolutely not benefiting you immediately in any shape, form, or fashion other than emotional happiness? And you can't buy anything with emotional happiness.
Right.
So what do? Like you don't give it up. That's my biggest thing to people is don't give it up. Let's sit down and figure out what do you have to do, what can you do to get it going. It might force you to get out your comfort zone. You have to get out your comfort zone in order to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like anybody that's ever had a booth at a festival know you're just sitting here in the sun and it's
Right.
hot and it's people are just walking by not paying any attention to you. You have to do that. You have to sit there, be looked at and gawked at by hundreds of people that don't care about anything about you or your life until that one person that comes by that does, right? And you
Mm.
just have to hold on till you get to that person. So how can I help you? And I love people too, and I love artists, and I know how hard it is because it was hard for me. It was very hard for me to just sit there, especially the type of work that I make. It's not like super acceptable everywhere you go. Like
Mm.
when you're doing art fairs and stuff like that, if people do birds or like trees or like any innocuous thing that people can like see and just walk by and like, yo, I like this butterfly, here you go, take some money. I mean, I'm making work about race relations and black identity. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
really not everybody's cup of tea. And so how do I take care of myself, my mental health, to get to that point? And that's way more important than in terms of the practicality of being an artist. That's the hard part. Everybody can make. Like everybody can draw. Like I'm not the best drawer that I know by far. Like I'm not like a lot of the people that I know that are really good at drawing or don't even make a living off their artwork
Totally. Yeah.
because they haven't figured that out. They haven't figured that part out, and that is the hard part. So I want to help. So when I see people that I know, and I don't do this for everybody, but I do it for the people that I know only need an extra push. Not the people that you need to like, they like Humpty Dumpty, like fell off the wall, like you can't put them back together. I don't want to help the people that I can't put together, like like that just are not emotionally ready to to deal
Mm.
with these type of things, and like you gotta like always piece them together with like tape and duct tape and glue. I'm looking at people that fell down off the wall and they just have a little crack and they just need to just hold it together just a little while longer
Mm.
while until they can find their audience, and that's always the hard part about art.
What would you say to someone who's maybe listening to this and feeling like they just have a little crack right now? That like what do you put in that emotional space in between feeling like you've just fallen and finding an audience?
I think that for most of the people that I've talked to, and you might get this on your podcast too, is that the successful people keep doing it.
Yeah.
Even when it's not fun, even when it's not comfortable, even when you don't have money. Like a person that would make art when they only have enough money to either go to the movies or make art, and they choose to make art.
Yeah.
That person will be the one that will eventually find an audience. And I just say eventually because I don't know when that is. Nobody can tell you when it is. Like we will never know. Like I didn't sell anything at all of those art walks and stuff I went to,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I kept making art because I kept thinking that, because to me, and most people that do end up being successful that I know have it in them that I just have to make my art better. Like if that's your conclusion at the end of all the obstacles you get to, and you say, I have to make my art better. Because if my art was better, then it'll get somebody's attention.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that jump to that conclusion will eventually succeed. And kind of it's the people that make all the other conclusions. So you kind of have to talk them out of it. Like, no, it's not. It's not the shirt you wore. No,
Right.
it's not. It's not the walls that you got for your booth. No, it's not that. They'll blame every other thing. Well, it was raining
Yeah.
that day for that one day, and then I woke up late, and it's not like no, it's not all of those things. It's like if you can always lean into your artwork, then that'll be what sustains you, because ultimately that's what makes all artists feel good. It's the artwork. Like it's not. I mean, no artist that I know enjoys accounting, right, or marketing or any of this other stuff. Like it's always the artwork. So I always tell people to somehow focus on the art, and whatever conversation I have with them is usually art focused.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, if you go to, like, if you went to a festival and you didn't sell anything, my question would be, what could you change for the next time that might get you a little bit better sales, right? Could your signage be better? Could you have more lower price work available? Could you have presented it better? It's all those type of things, the things that you can actually change,
Right.
right? Because you cannot change who walks in that booth.
Mm-hmm.
You can't change the weather. You can't change like all the other stuff. You can't change you being beside a super popular artist that does something completely different from you. So
Mm-hmm.
his crowd that he's drawing, he does flowers and you do cows.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but so you're surrounded by people that like flowers, but you don't do flowers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't change that. Like, you just have to be like happy and satisfied with it. It's a hard thing to tell somebody. Believe me, I've sat there and I've spent years like feeling bad, and I don't want people to feel bad. That's ultimately what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I know how I felt in that situation when I'm making this art that I think is great and nobody responded to it.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so, I mean, it is a low feeling, y'all. And I don't mean to like to make it so like emotional and stuff like that, but
But it
but most
is.
art, yeah, most art is very emotional. Like, you
Yeah.
create from an emotional place, and so it emotionally affects you when you don't think people like you. You don't think, like, not just that people don't like your work, that they don't like you.
Totally. Yeah.
You are a bad person, sitting here making these cows when you obviously know everybody wants flowers. Like, like, what's wrong with you? Like, that those type of feelings are supernatural, and they're not healthy. And there are ways that we can talk about it, and I can support you in continuing your journey, because you never know. Like, you couldn't have told those people that walk past me at the Marietta Art Walks that I would be making pieces that sell for the amount of money that they do now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they would never know that. Like, they just like, oh, him over there making that, that black stuff.
Uh-huh. No, I love all of that, and yeah, I was hoping I could like. I was hoping I could trick you into like saying some of that good stuff. Did it? Yeah.
Oh
But,
yeah, I get to going on that stuff.
yeah, I
I get
love
to
it.
going.
No, it's one of
Yeah,
my favorite
yeah,
things.
because you know
So
what? Because yeah, because I love artists, yo. It's
yeah.
nothing. It's nothing like talking to, as a creative, talking to somebody else that doesn't see the world as it is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's what we all do. Like, in some shape, form, or fashion, we envision and create a different world than what we see. We
Yeah.
take in these like external stimuli, and we filter it through us. So what comes out is us, and like it's a very particular way of seeing the world. And I feel like most of the time when I connect to other people, like, I know them in a way that I don't really know regular people, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, regular people that just go to the 9 to 5. Like, I don't understand the 9 to 5.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it when I was there. People that work for 20 years and never make anything. Like, you never even want to make anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh man, that's tough. Like, it's hard. Like, I feel sorry for
How
them.
do
Like,
you wake
it's
up
hard
in the
to,
morning?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, why? why, why bother, yo? But
Yeah.
yeah. But I love artists, and I want to support like everybody the way that I wish that I would have been supported, even as a kid. Like, even looking back at like growing up in Littleton, like, people knew I could draw and they acknowledged me, but they couldn't support me. Like, they didn't have a concept of feeding into my creativity or my being as an artist. They couldn't imagine it. So I didn't get it. So for a long time, there was an emptiness that I had to feel myself eventually. But now, when I start to understand that feeling, I look back at some people and realize that that's exactly the same thing they're going through. That's how you used to be an artist. That's how you used to draw. And that's a sad thing. Like, you should still be drawing. Like, why would you stop? You know?
Yeah.
So that kind of thing.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend the other day who is a writer, and she's just kind of recently gotten in this situation where she's been able to quit her 9 to 5, and now she's just kind of bouncing around the States and Canada, going from residency to residency. And she worked really, really hard to get in a situation where she could do that. So she, applied for all the grants and she saved all the money. She would never, it wasn't like, I'm going to go to happy hour on Fridays with the work guys afterwards. She's like, no, that money's going into savings and I'm going into the studio to write,
Yeah, yeah.
and I have so much admiration for her. But what we were talking about was the people who don't understand sort of creating extra work for yourself. When you talk to people who are just satisfied with a 9 to 5, they're like, have you seen, I don't know, like, have you been following Game of Thrones? Or I don't know, they ask you something and you're like, oh no, I haven't had time. And they're like, what have you been doing? And you're like, well, I make art and I run this podcast. And it's just, there's just sort of, they look at you like you're crazy. Like, why would you do something when you didn't have to? Like, it's so fundamentally different brain function, it seems like, for someone who can't conceive of why you would want to work all the time when you didn't have to. Like, it's just like, why would you do that? Like, yeah.
But that's exactly what it is. Just it's working all of the time.
Yeah.
But it's and they've also, a lot of people don't have the concept of enjoying work, right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Like enjoying what you do.
Totally.
Like this is like if people ask me like, what do I do when I'm not making art? It's like I'm thinking about making art. That's what I'm doing.
I'm planning about what I'm going to make next.
Like I'm saying, hoping I can go back. Like, so I mean that's the whole point. So some people don't have that type of enjoyment in their life, or they get it from different ways, and that's what I'm always fascinated with too. Is like what do you do for fun?
Mm-hmm.
Like what do you do, not just for fun, but to fulfill yourself? And it can be anything. It doesn't have to be making art. Like you can just be an avid reader and like really enjoy it. And like that's super cool too. But it's got to be something. And so, most artists, that something is making art, and you just got to find a way to get back to it.
Yeah, I'd love to take this transition to talk more specifically about your work, because we touched on it a little bit. If I can quote you back to yourself from your website, you say, "My aim is to create a new kind of propaganda to spread messages that speak to all aspects of Black life." And and so I think I was thinking about that. From what I've seen of your work, it's definitely, you can tell it's a reflection of Black identity. And I wanted to ask you sort of, at what point did you realize, like, this is what I want my message to be? Like, this is what moves me in this way, that I need to create work about this. Like, was that always present in your practice, or was it something that you came to? Like, how did this come to be your inspiration?
I think I have to tell you two stories. And it'll sum up the whole thing. Where first is, anybody that knows me from like high school or way back know that I've always been extra sensitive about racial stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because I can't look at the history of what happened in America and not see it as a direct indictment on myself and how I'm going to be viewed, fairly or unfairly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always been angry about that. My best friend will tell you that, from my best friend Mike from 4th grade, he'll tell you that when I saw the movie Rosewood, I don't know if you ever seen the movie Rosewood, but Rosewood, the town of Rosewood, there was a white woman lied and said that a black man had attacked her. And so they basically came to this black town called Rosewood and basically killed all the men and were coming after the women. Like, it was a big racial attack. It was this huge thing. Like, after I saw that movie, I couldn't talk to people for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because I was so angry and I was so worked up. And so I know that at the way that people see race, I know that I'm the person that will suffer any consequences from race being in the equation. Like, as a black man, I will ultimately be the person that suffers. So if you look at people being pulled over by police, like auto traffic tickets and stuff, like across every state, every city, every region in America, black people are pulled over at a rate 2 to 3 times higher than a white person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Now that's now so it's either two things. Like either black people can inherently not drive naturally in our DNA, like we just are impossible. We can't learn how to drive, or something is being done to us.
Yeah.
Now, more than likely, something is being done to us, and so that's how I felt my entire life. Like, in I'm always pushing back against whatever stereotype it is because most of the time it's not true. And if you bothered to give me the benefit of being of humanity, then you would see that everything that's happening is perfectly natural. But often in that equation, you won't get that. Like these assumptions kind of stick with people, and I have to suffer with it. Like I have to be followed around the store when I got money and I'm
Yeah.
looking to buy something, and I'm still followed around as if I'm trying to steal. Like that's ridiculous. Like it's ridiculous for other people to have to go through it. So empathy is a big thing for me, where I don't like to see my people suffer. So a lot of times, especially growing up in Littleton, North Carolina, it's basically 95% black.
Hmm.
Like my school was 95% black all the way through high school. I didn't really talk to a white person in a meaningful conversation. Like not like I didn't know any, but not in a meaningful person to person conversation until I got to college. So I'm what, 18, 19 years old, like by that time.
Yeah.
So and so that has skewed my point of view where I know that black people are human. I know that a lot of things that are attributed to negative stereotypes about race are just not true or complete misunderstandings
Yeah.
or are being judged against a standard that we have never been able to live by. Even
Hmm.
to the point of where I lived in Littleton, North Carolina, there was a black area.
Mm.
In Littleton, North Carolina, in what is this, 1989, there's a black area. How do you think that black area got there? You think we just all just decided to live with each other?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
just out of the blue, like one year, like 87, we just like, yo, we're all gonna live together. Like, nah, that's not what happened. So you gotta understand the history. And so the second thing that happened was when I did get laid off from my graphic design job, I sat there and thought like when I got my severance package, it was like this is the one chance that I'm ever going to have to be a full time artist, like to really like live in it and be happy. And so you got to figure out like I had done the shows and I wasn't being super successful. I was still making art, and I was just thinking like if this is going to go down in flames, what do I want to be doing? Right?
Right.
What kind of work do I want to be making if I'm going to make stuff for the next year and nobody buy it? What is going to make me absolutely happy? So I said that whenever I close my eyes, whatever I see will be what I make. And so what I saw was my people, like my just black people being human, being free, being struggling against oppression, like fighting against the system, still being themselves and being beautiful and being proud and being like righteous. Like that's what I saw. And so I said, if this is gonna go down in flames, like if this is the only chance I'm ever gonna have, that's the
Hmm.
type of work I'm gonna make. And so that's what happened.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So that's where it came from, and it worked.
I was
It'll
gonna
say that.
say, I think that that's such a sort of beautiful lesson in like what kind of work really connects with people, and it's the work that's coming from the artist that is like. I love that turn of phrase. You said like, "What do I see when I close my eyes?" Right, and it's
Yeah.
like it's when it's coming from this pure making, this pure drive of what's like deep in your bones, a part of you that you're passionate about. It's like a beautiful way to connect with other people.
Yeah. And I was extra nervous about it too. Like,
Mm.
because I mean, you're sitting there, you're sitting there, you betting the whole farm on making black art. It's like, that's probably not the smartest thing in the universe for you to do, but it's like, this is what I'm gonna do. And
Yeah.
kind of, and I was extra surprised that when I did start making that and stop, like, my work has steadily become more poignant and more
Hmm.
direct about what I'm trying to say. It becomes about and 400 especially the show is all about this blackness and kind of almost a thesis on like what I feel about it. And so the more that I get into it, the more I start to tap into that thing. I think the more that people like it, all people, not just black people. And I don't make art just for black people.
Hmm.
Like I make art that focus on the humanity of individuals that happen to be black. Not, I take that back. They don't happen to be black.
Right.
They are
Yeah.
specifically black
Yeah.
and specifically human, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what I'm showing you, without cutting it for you. Like I'm not like sugarcoating it, or I'm not giving it. Like I'm unapologetically showing these people in their humanity that you have to acknowledge. And you have to, and one of the things that I specifically thought was, because I know that race is such a barrier in America, that the way that I present it has to be executed at a higher quality than I would think that I'm capable of doing.
Hmm.
So I'm always pushing to be more special with how I produce my work, like how my woodcuts look, the different layers that I'm adding onto it. I feel like it has to be more great because I am dealing with such a tough topic for people.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully that's what people see that I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So something that I've wondered about when it comes to honestly just collecting black artists and trying to be sensitive to this pattern that can happen where someone who's a member of any minority is often asked to speak for the collective. So
Right.
right, so sort of keeping that in mind. But it came up kind of in what you were talking about, how you're making work about black identity but not just for a black audience, is that a lot of times work about black identities, of course, has black bodies in it, right? And that's absolutely
Right.
makes sense. And so as a white person, if I wanted to collect that, because I think it's beautiful, because I want to support the artist, because I want to be an ally, whatever that motivation is, I have a certain, I don't know, maybe anxiety or sensitivity though about, like, let's say like putting an image of a black woman framed on my wall, because there's such a tradition of like the exotification, objectification of black bodies by white people.
Right.
So what's I don't even, maybe that's just sort of the question in and of itself, is that like, if I want to support and collect the art, but is there something sort of inherently problematic about me then displaying it, or if I have a connection to it, is it different? I just love to hear your thoughts on that sort of particular aspect of I guess just racial dynamic within art within the world.
Um, I would say it's an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because you can appreciate artwork that has a black body in it
Mm-hmm.
if you can appreciate the humanity of that figure. And so there really is no barrier between you collecting and displaying it if that's what you like.
Right.
And kind of in a way you have to be confident in your own point of view, in your own
Mm-hmm.
perspective to to challenge anybody that challenges you. I would say that
Mm-hmm.
is that when people that's a let's see. I want to put it in a great way. Like, I
Yeah,
want to be
sorry for
like
like putting
super
you on the
poetic.
spot with like a super heavy question.
Oh no,
But
no, this is a fun question because you know
okay.
what I had this conversation about in grad school. They were talking about whether or not the work that I was making, if they were the proper audience for it.
Hmm.
And I'm the only black person. Well, there's two black people, but one is a third year, and it was me. There are other minorities in it, but most of the people identify as white. And so the thing is that this is the contract that we've signed to be in this space together and critique each other's work. So my work is about race. So that's what you have to critique. That's what you have to contend with. And kind of whatever your work is about is what I have to contend with. But I don't get to hide behind, well, I'm a man, so I don't understand feminist work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or I'm straight, so I don't understand gay work, or homosexual, like whatever you're talking about. I don't understand that. So I'm a straight man. I can't worry with it. Like I don't hide behind that, and that limits the true engagement of what we're trying to say. I don't think anybody's trying to make work in a vacuum. I don't want to make work in a vacuum, right? I don't want my work to only be bought by Black people. I'm making huge statements about humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I want you to relate to it. I want you to look at one of my pieces and think, that is absolutely beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful, and I would like it in my house. I want you to have it in your house. I want you to show it in your house and be proud of it. And I want when somebody asks you, why do you have these Black people hanging in your house? I want you to tell them exactly how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say. And so I don't want you to succumb to the pressure of otherness. And that's kind of what it is, right? Is that you have something that is not you in your house. Why? Do you deserve to have these Black figures in your house?
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
on that end, I would want you to be comfortable enough in how you feel about liking these figures or enjoying the Black bodies or enjoying the artists, however they carve or however they paint stuff, right? Like Margaret Bolan. Margaret Bolan is a painter. She paints these Black children, Black little girls and stuff, and all these different things. But she's a white woman.
Mm-hmm.
If a white person, this is a trick question, but if a white person was to buy a painting of a Black person by a white person, does that eliminate the question that you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it different because it is from a white person? You see what I'm saying? Like ultimately, that part of it should be inconsequential.
Mm-hmm.
Like you feel how you feel, and that's how you should feel. That's how everybody should feel. Like I don't not show white people work in my house.
Right.
That's ridiculous, right?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So in that same notion, I think it's ridiculous for you not to show Black people in your house,
Mm-hmm.
or not to show a work featuring a Black figure that you think is great. You think is great. That's your response to it.
Right.
Is you like it, and that's enough. That's enough for all collectors, because ultimately that's the only thing that we're doing. When people collect art, is that it speaks to them somehow and reverberates in their soul to the point that they must possess it, and it doesn't get more visceral than that. So if I can make something that you as a white person or any white person sees and enjoys, white people like one of the pieces that I often sell that people really like is this piece called "To Be Free." So it's a Black person woodcut, and they like how these hands like pulling on him. It looks like it's pulling on his shirt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I know the one. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a strong piece, and it's talking about perseverance. Perseverance is not Black perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's all of us can persevere. Maybe you're persevering through something different but these hands can be representative of whatever you want them to be. Like this Black figure can be any man. It doesn't have to be just a Black man. Like I can't relate to it because he's a Black man. That doesn't make any sense.
Totally. Yeah. No, that's.
Oh, that was a good question.
Oh, good.
I like that
Good. I'm glad because it's yeah, and I love what you were saying about how kind of to give too much energy to it in that way is to sort of double down on the otherness.
Exactly.
And to also double down on that extremely problematic notion that a human body is by default white.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That there's no way for me to relate to it. Like
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible. Like, is it really impossible for a white man to relate to a Black man going through something? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody that does think so, there's a problem with them, not with you. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I would say. Is
Yeah.
that I mean, you think about it in terms of like television and stuff. Most shows have white leads.
Oh, absolutely.
So if I was to say that I would never relate to any show, I would not watch any TV, and that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make any sense. Like the same way people complain if like James Bond was Black or something like that.
Totally.
Like that whole conversation. But
Yeah.
I personally acknowledge the humanity of all people. And I specifically make my work to fight against people that would not acknowledge my humanity in return.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the bar for me. in all circumstances. And I just simply don't accept anything else. And that's how anybody should be. So if you collecting black work and you like it and the black artists are like great, I think that's what the problem was with black artists now that are just now getting their due. Like in over here, I talk about Charles White a lot, but Charles White was a phenomenal artist.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably one of the best draftsmen in American history, but he was not given the proper due because he was black. And so he has a retrospective now that's traveling around, and it's a phenomenal show. It's amazing. He does incredible print work, incredible, like mind blowing, like the same kind of mind blowing as anybody else you've ever seen. He's probably better than him, and he couldn't get his due because of his blackness.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think of like other black artists that would get into shows based on their work and then be rejected from the show when they find out that you're black.
Right.
Like I can't remember the artist, but they got a letter in the mail after being accepted into a show, and the letter told them, "Oh, we didn't know you were black, so now that you're black, we can't show your work here," even though they were in the contest and were in the show. Like, so there's all these kind of issues that people have to contend with that I don't acknowledge it. Like it doesn't that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, no, that's all. It's just really beautiful, honestly. Like I love it. Like I love what you're saying about that. It's that just that thread of humanity and human experience, and that obviously race in America and anywhere is so complicated, and it's historical, it's systematic, it's intentional and unintentional, but one of the really core roots of it is people profiting on convincing people that they're different, and
Right.
Different from each other, different from the standard, whatever it is, and which of course is just not true. Like experiences are different.
And I think it works the other way too, where I did this the Black Baby project, right,
Mm-hmm.
which is it's a print that I did, and I ended up making a print that was, to me, I thought it was super powerful, but my wife hated it. I made this print it was a lino cut of a baby, then I screen printed like an orange jumpsuit on it, and it said DOC for Department of Corrections on it. So I thought it was a really strong piece. My wife hated it. In that sense that I wanted to redo it, but I couldn't get the initial idea out of my head, so I started giving it to other artists. So I'm basically printing this lino cut of a black child onto this paper, and then handing it to other artists and saying, "Look, what is your message for a black child, like born right now?" And I purposely picked black artists, but I personally picked non-black artists because the same way I hand my children over to the school system here, it's not an all black school system. Like it's mostly white, right? And that's fine. Like I trust them with my child. Like you can have no greater trust than I have left my child with you in your care, and not like followed you around with a knife to your back. Like I absolutely love my children. So the fact that I have that kind of trust is that I trust you to recognize the humanity of my children the same way that you would recognize the humanity of your children. And I hope Paul doesn't mind me telling the story, but Paul Rodin, one of the artists that did one of the Black Baby prints, he was saying kind of the same thing you were, where he was hesitant about doing it. He didn't want to step on any toes. He don't want to go off and say too much. And you know what? I appreciate that. Like I appreciate you recognizing what it is and attempting to respond to it in a meaningful way. And I basically told him, like, I know what this means for you as a white person to paint on this black child. I know what it means. And I am accepting of it because this black child belongs to the community. This black child is an American. My kids are American. They are Black American. They each have their own individual identity, but they are American. We belong in the system. Like we have to acknowledge and accept each other. And it is up to you or any other non-black person that my child interacts with, to kind of take up the role of nurturing my children. I want that. I don't want them to simply be in a bubble only touched by black people. That doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so the exposure across these different cultures leads to a more well-rounded child. So I appreciate Paul being a part of it. I appreciate Diane Hicks-Cox being a part of it. She's Canadian. I appreciate Sude, who is Iranian grad student at Georgia State. Like, I appreciate all of these other cultures and people being a part of it, because you have to, at some point, if you can't care for a child, then we have lost all humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's us. I think that we can, at least at this point, recognize the helplessness of any child of any color and just acknowledge that we care about them. And if we can start there, then everything can be fixed.
Yeah. You totally gave me goosebumps. Like, that's so beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know it's a printmaking podcast, but I feel these things so to my core.
Yeah.
Like that it is a shame, some of the things that I've seen that we have accepted as a society, and a lot of times, like I said, I'm the one that'll be. It's an extreme example, but I'm Trayvon Martin. Right.
Yeah.
And if there has ever been an incident of that magnitude, I will be the one that's shot, and whoever it is will be escaped, because it is automatically figured that at some point I, in my blackness, have probably done something wrong. And that hurts your heart, you know. And so we shouldn't be like that. And so that's ultimately what I want to get at. That hopefully through my artwork and expressing these ideas of blackness as individuals, as people, as just my blackness alone does not inhibit my voice. That's basically all I want. and so sometimes that takes on different forms, right? So sometimes it is direct propaganda, like my pieces that say "Be American" or "Strength through Unity." Like, sometimes it's in your face, aggressive, trying to push back against you taking my humanity, and sometimes it's just me loving my wife with my Black Love series, or being beautiful, like, and accepting ourselves. Sometimes it looks like that, but it can look like a lot of different things. And so I hope that's what people see when they look at my artwork.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to hear you talk about the exhibition that you touched on too, because I feel like it's a big part of this whole conversation is the 400 exhibition that's actually on the Aviation Center.
Yeah. So the 400 show, I love collaborating between artists. Like, so when I look and I study people like Bob Blackburn, who used to work with all kinds of artists in his studio, and the experience that I've had working with other people, to non-printmakers, to make prints, just introducing them to techniques, the whole like problem solving part of it. I love that part, the connection between the kind of creative energy that gets shared between two people. So I always wanted to do a show that would be all collaborations, and I just needed a way to do it. So now this year is 2019. The first slave ships arrived in America in 1619. That listed 20 and odd Negroes as part of the cattle. I don't know what the right word is. Cargo.
Yeah.
Was 20 and odd Negroes. So that was the beginning of the journey. So it'll be exactly 400 years. So as we, as humans, often do, try to make time significant, right? Put meaning to our lives and our individual struggles. This 400-year anniversary came along, and it's like, this is a perfect time to make some kind of statement about it, to say that from that moment till now, what can we acknowledge as having happened? What can we acknowledge that has been significant, and what can we acknowledge that we want for the future? Because one of the artists that participated in the show pointed out that the 400 years, 1619, was not the beginning of a story.
Right.
And 2019 now is not the end of a story. But in this time period, what kind of statements could we make? And so if I'm talking about a lot of my work is about blackness. So the last show I did before that was called Bright Black, which was me trying to figure out if I'm going to make work about black identity, what does it mean to me to be black, and kind of what does that entail? Inside of that show, there was this one piece called The Council, and it was these like five faces that were kind of like cut up and like overlapping each other. It was a great print, and part of that was that my idea of blackness comes from my understanding of everybody else's experience of blackness, because I won't be treated any differently than a black person in Mississippi or LA or New York or wherever you're from. Your experience of blackness is just as valid as any other experience of blackness. And it can mean different things to every person that's involved. So if I'm going to tell the story of the last 400 years of black America, black Americans, period, I didn't want to tell it by myself. So I brought in all these other different artists. Most of them were not printmakers, some of them were. But over the year, it took a whole year to make this show, but I basically collaborated with every single artist in there. I think it ended up being like 22 artists that I ended up collaborating with. And we made different types of work, and I didn't define strictly what collaboration was, right? So the Black Baby Project came out of it as a way for other people to collaborate with me and just embellishing one of my prints, right? To me, that's collaboration, right? Me sitting down with another printmaker, Jasmine, the co-host from the podcast, and like plotting out and planning and adding to and working up a concept to make a print, original print. That's collaboration, right? Me being a master printer type for another artist, Kevin Cole, printing for him, that's collaboration. So all these different ways of collaborating. We did like sculptural elements with Grace Kisa, where I took two woodcuts that I made and I made like a house out of it. And so the house essentially functions as a stage for her to do her mixed media sculptures in. And she made these like very nice like resin figures with like zip ties and like sisal and like wood chips. And man, it was fantastic. It was a fantastic piece. But you know, making all these different ways of collaborating, and the kind of the common denominator would be me, where I would be guiding or relating all of these different voices into one voice. So ultimately, I wanted to do a show that I didn't have my name on any one piece, but the show in its entirety was a reflection of me taking in all these other different perspectives and trying to understand exactly what do I feel about where we are as a people. Because some people feel good about it and some people don't. Like, why do you, and I have to kind of understand, what don't you like about it? What do you like about it? And that informs my own understanding as I try to figure out where I sit in this whole struggle. So it was, man, it was a lot of work.
Yeah. Sounds like.
Yeah, because I started right in the middle of doing this show. Like 2 months later, I started grad school.
Yeah.
At Georgia State. So, man, it was a tremendous amount of work, but it was well worth it.
Yeah.
Because I think the show turned out fantastic.
It looks incredible from the photos.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and and a lot of them can be seen. I was going to say, for anyone who's listening and wants to take a look at any of this, is your Instagram probably the best place? Is it Studio Noise Instagram? Is it both? Like, if they want to pull up on their phones right now.
Yeah, a lot of it will be on my Instagram.
Okay, I'll link in the show notes, of course. Yeah.
So I'm also updating my website with a page specifically dedicated to it.
Good.
And it'll have, and because we did a lot of work. We made a couple of videos. We made like a documentary like video of the whole process, starting from like our first meeting way back in July last year until now. Like, it talked to all the other artists. So there's a lot of stuff that went into the show that I'm trying to find a way to present and probably try to put it other places. I think it's a really strong show. Yeah. So I would love for it to have more homes, like be able to travel like other places or do other things. Yeah, that's always would be nice.
Of course, yeah. So you said you're the collaborator. Is printmaking have a pretty big place in that show because of that, or were you kind of like just really more fluid with the media?
Oh no, it it was a lot of printmaking because I did screen printing inside of it. I
Mm-hmm.
did image transfers. I did carving. We did woodcuts. We did some of the black baby stuff where they colored on my prints. I took the wood blocks and made a house.
Hmm.
So man, it was because my practice is basically printmaking,
Yeah.
and so I'm basically bringing in whoever has whatever you do. How can I put that into a print, like or translate it into what I know, which is printmaking. So like the photographer and then Therese Miller, she has these photos, and then I did image transfers with it, but I distorted the image transfers with acetone before we printed them. Um, so it's a lot of different processes that went into it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a lot of printmaking in the show. And it doesn't always feel like it because some of the pieces like Tracy Morrell did this one piece that was like a ship in resin, and it has like all these like torn pieces of paper.
Hmm.
If you have to look closely, but I screen printed a pattern and colored the paper that she tore up into the painting.
Yeah.
So that was the element that I added, but it's not traditionally printmaking. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh,
Like I'm just
totally. Yeah.
I use printmaking to create the material that she used for the collage. Like so, like even if it's like one or two steps removed, it's still at the heart of it is about printmaking. And I think
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
what I love about printmaking too, is that it can be translated into all these other mediums. Like it doesn't have to be additions of very, super clean 2-inch borders, that kind of thing. Like you can create the material for other things. Like the
Yeah.
wood block itself, and I've used this a lot. I'll use it in my last show too. But the wood blocks that are created are themselves art before you even print it. Like you
Mm-hmm.
look at it, it's the texture. You can feel like all the marks and all the stuff in it. Like even like after it's inked, the way some of it, the ink sits on the surface and some of the lines are filled in. Like it feels like its own character already. That's what I love about printmaking. Like it's so much you can do with it.
And I think to put printmaking in the box of like, it has to be flat, it has to be addition, this sort of thing.
Yeah,
You're totally glossing over and not giving its due to the fact that there are unique aesthetics that you can only get through printmaking, you know?
exactly.
And
Exactly.
yeah, and I think that sometimes one of the issues we have as printmakers is just being thought of as like, well, that's how you like just make a painting, but like a bunch of times, you know? Right? But that's not it at all. Like,
Nah, not at all. And especially like, man, I've seen some really creative stuff that people have done that like puts me to shame. Like it makes me think like I'm not doing enough of what I'm doing. But that's the thing. Because all it is, especially like when you take like woodcuts, it's just wood, ink, and paper.
mhm.
That's all it is. And so every person you have to take it and translate it your way. And just from those simple three elements, you can make incredible things. I love it. I don't know. Yeah, so there's no other way to put it, but it's just something about like, everybody has these same processes and they've been around for hundreds of thousands of years,
Mhm.
like people been making prints forever, even printing the fabrics for their clothes. Like that's
Mhm.
printmaking when you think about it.
Or like the
And
even like cave paintings, like people putting something on their hand, sticking
oh
it on the
yeah,
wall. That's a
yeah.
transfer, you know? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, yo. So it's like, taking the same thing that everybody else is dealing with, but now, like I said, I think I said it before, but you're putting yourself into it. Like this, you are filtering the world through you and out through whatever that process is. Like, yeah, it's incredible.
So it's sort of my next question. I was thinking about it and I was like, I know it's always difficult as an artist because what you get is you put a year more work into a show and then it's up, and then what happens though is people come to the show and go, so what's next, you know? Which so so I'm like, oh, I feel sort of bad asking this knowing that you've probably just had that experience and you're like, what do you mean what's next? Like, and a year wasn't enough for you? Like,
Yeah,
but
that. it's funny because I'm all about the journey. So the minute I dropped off all those pieces, I was ready to do something else.
Hmm.
Like and I don't know what it's gonna be. I'm learning stone lithography now, and
Yeah.
so I'm gonna try to get into it and kind of experiment with that and see what I can come up with because it's completely different from how I draw, how I see things, and I love it. I really like how smooth and it is, and these kind of textures and stuff that you can get out of it. So so this year I promised myself that I probably won't be doing any more big shows like this
Mm.
until my thesis show. My thesis show, and it's a 3 year program, so I just finished my first year. So two years from now would be the next time I do a big show like this,
Hmm.
because I do just want to sit in it. Like I want to sit in this grad school. I want to sit in these techniques. I want to sit in this time, and I want to see what else I could do because I like the statements that I'm making. I'm very proud of 400 and
Yeah.
all the other stuff that I've made, and I just want to see what else I can add to whatever the conversation is. Yeah, so I'm just gonna sit in these techniques and see what happens. And I don't. It's exciting, so exciting. I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know what I want to make, and it kind of I always get this feeling. I don't know if you get this feeling, but I get this feeling that after I finish something, I always look at it and it's like, man, that's pretty good. I will never make anything this good
Right.
for the rest of my life. But then, like after I say that enough times, I kind of take it as a challenge. Like, I can do better than that
Yeah.
somehow. Like I'm gonna do, I can do something. And so I think that's where I am now. Like I'm looking at it, and I'm so proud of it that I don't know if I'll ever make anything that good in my life,
Mm.
but I'm gonna try. And so that's
I love
that's
that.
where I am. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a wonderful attitude to have towards it because I know that feeling where you're just like, you sit back and you're like, well, I've peaked. Like,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's
yep,
it for me.
man, I'm
Time
going to
to
be
teach.
disappointing everyone from here on out. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I hope they're not expecting this again. Yeah, because but hopefully I got something else to say.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a great opportunity to just kind of like wrap up. And we touched on it a little bit, but please can you remind everyone what's the best way for people to find you and follow you and listen to your podcast and buy your work and all of that stuff?
Oh yeah, so definitely check me out on IG. I'm always on IG at J Barber Studio. And listen to the podcast, Studio Noise Podcast. That's noise with a Z.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Studio Noise, Noize podcast on IG. Check out my website, www.jbarberstudio.com. And just kind of keep up with me. I'll be working on something. And I'm looking for collaborators. I'm always looking for collaborators because I'm going to start back up the Black Baby Project. And I'll be sending out more Black babies to people. So if they want one, holla at me. Let me know.
Yeah.
I can send you. You can be a part of the project.
I love it. That's so good. Well, thank you so much for joining me and being just open and amazing. And yeah, it's been a huge pleasure. So thank you.
Oh no, thank you. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Talk to you soon. Well, that's our show for this week. Join me again in 2 weeks' time when my guest will be Paul DeRuvo, a non-binary printmaker working in Norfolk, Connecticut. Paul shares their incredible printmaking pedigree, being introduced to the Center for Contemporary Printmaking at age just 14 and falling madly in love with the process. We talk bodies and gender and silk aquatint and queer communities and Goya and collaborative printmaking and so much more. So do yourself a favor and make sure you tune in for that one. But this episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing help from Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you in 2 weeks.